Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the London School of Economics India Forum 2019.
Thank you for making it on a Saturday morning. We promise we will make the event memorable and worth it.
My name is Arzoi Sharma.
And I am Manaswini Bala.
Today, we plan to engage you in intriguing conversations with some of the best minds of the nation, discussing and deliberating some of the most pressing issues that are social, economic, and political and face contemporary India today.
The agenda for the day spans across 4 areas: media, sports, politics, and business. We would now like to call upon our Vice President, Ankita Agarwal, to deliver the inauguration speech.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to one and all. It gives me immense pleasure as I, Ankita Agarwal, welcome you all to the LSE India Forum 2019. This is the 6th year that the LSE India Society is hosting LIF, and this morning I can say with complete confidence that over the years we have grown in every aspect. Today, we are bigger and better than ever. Let me also remind you that LSE India Forum is by far the largest student-run India-focused conference in the UK. LIF was conceptualized in 2014 as Economic Forum for India at LSE. It has successfully proven to be an emerging platform for debate, discussion, and deliberation on issues that are crucial to India. LIF focuses on educating young minds not only from India, but all around the globe, and allows them interaction with some of the brightest and inspiring Indians from the field of politics, business, media, sports, economics, and arts. I am confident that future editions of LIF will continually expand this list to be able to accommodate leaders from many more fields. Since its liberation in 1947, India has risen from an economically weak country to one of the fastest growing and largest economies in the world. Such rapid changes in the socio-economic conditions bring with them an array of new challenges which must be faced to pave the path for an even more prosperous future. This is why this year our theme is Disrupting the Status Quo. The London School of Economics provides an ideal platform to launch an inspection into a wide range of issues ranging from politics to media. While the jumps in rankings such as ease of doing business indicate a bright future, increasing unemployment and disability in the banking sector highlight how we are far from perfect. The motto of the LSE translates to knowing the causes of things, and we believe it is a great opportunity for us as we attempt to analyze the causes behind India's current state after 72 years of independence and how do we put our country on the path of glory. In the first half, we present to you the business panel wherein we will discuss the Indian startup story and their foray into the international market. This will be followed by the politics panel where we will focus on the emerging trends in the Indian politics and the use of social media in political campaigns. I sincerely hope you enjoy the day today. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me or anyone from the committee in case you have any questions during the course of the day. Before I hand over to Manaswini Bala and Arzoi Sharma, who will be your host for the day, I believe there are some entities without whom this event wouldn't have been possible. We are very grateful to our knowledge partner, Z Entertainment, silver sponsor Avance, media partner Z5, hotel partner Taj, and LSE partners India Observatory and Nassau, who have made it possible for us to put together an engaging program. Thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Ankita. As our VP highlighted, India is undergoing major social transformation. Issues and successes, such as the marriage of sports with money, the plethora of Indian startup stories, and the vastness of the political spectrum, encapsulate our theme for LIF 2019, Disrupting the Status Quo. We aim to capture the essence of the changes that have occurred in the past years in various fields.
In its 6th year now, our forum is a testament to the admirable progress our nation has made in the recent past. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we bring to you our first panel of the day, the business panel. This year's business panel consists of Mr. Ananth Narayanan and Ms. Swati Bhargava, who will indulge in dialogue regarding our theme, the Indian startup story.
I'd like to welcome our distinguished speakers, along with our moderator, Professor Alnoor Bhimani, on stage with a round of applause.
According to the National Association of Software and Service Companies, the startups in India have seen 108% growth in total funding, from USD 2 billion in 2017 to USD 4.2 billion in 2018.
The president of NASSCOM, Debjani Ghosh, commented that India is becoming the startup hub. The opportunity for growth is enormous, something that people have never before seen in their lifetime, particularly in the developing world. She further adds that the challenge now relates to how fast companies wish to transform.
Reports have shown that over 1,200 startups have been established in 2018, including 8 unicorns, taking the total number of startups to 7,200, with more than 400 of them expanding globally.
The key points under discussion in the business panel will be the role of unicorns in nurturing talent within the startup ecosystem, whether the lack of timely exits is the reason behind low domestic capital, and the foray of Indian ventures into the international markets.
The topics for the panel are designed to identify how the startup industry has disrupted the status quo within the business field and has truly made a tangible impact on how businesses are looked at. Our first panelist is Mr. Ananth Narayanan.
Mr. Narayanan is the former CEO of Myntra and Jabong, the country's largest platform for fashion and lifestyle products. Under his leadership, Myntra has made several strategic acquisitions. In 2014, Mr. Narayanan was featured as one of India's hottest 40 under 40.
Long gone. Long gone. Oh. No longer 40.
Hottest is the word she used there.
An alumnus of the University of Madras and the University of Michigan, he has expertise in driving performance improvement and product development. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Our second panelist for this panel is Ms. Swati Bhargava. As an LSE alumnus, Ms. Bhargava is known as one of India's top women entrepreneurs. She has been recognized on numerous platforms for her success by various stakeholders. She is the co-founder of Cashkaro, India's largest cashback and coupons portal, as well as the co-founder of Pouring Pounds, one of UK's largest operator of rewards, cashback, and voucher websites launched in 2011. Ma'am, thank you for being here, and we warmly welcome you back to the London School of Economics.
Thank you so much.
Our moderator for the panel is Professor Alnoor Bhimani. Mr. Bhimani is a professor of management accounting and founding director of the LSE Entrepreneurship at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He's also the former head of the Department of Accounting. Professor Bhimani's academic work covers financial controls in the digital economy, management accounting, strategic finance, entrepreneurship and economic growth, as well as global development and governance issues. Thank you, sir, for honoring us with your presence.
Without any further ado, we would like to hand the stage to our moderator, Professor Bhimani, to begin the discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so welcome all. This is the first panel session of the day. If some of you have come to the conferences that we've had before, you'll know that it's a fantastic day today, and there's lots in store. But of course, business always comes first, and so we've got this panel set up for you first. So Swati and Ananth, thank you for coming. I know you've just flown in last evening, and there's no hint of any jet lag there, so that's a good thing. So I wanted to kick off with just asking you what's brought you to, in your case, being co-founder, in your case, CEO, or just CEO until recently. What's the journey that has taken you to where you've been and where you are now?
I'm happy to start. So firstly, by the way, I'm excited to be here. I've never been to LSE before, so I'm actually looking forward to seeing LSE as well, in addition to the panel. So the last 4 years, I ran Myntra. Myntra, as said, is a fashion e-commerce business. It was bought by a company called Flipkart, which then got bought recently by Walmart. So we were part of the large Walmart acquisition. Before that, I spent 15 years at McKinsey, which is a consulting firm where I did nothing in fashion, tech, or retail. I led the automotive product development practice for many years. I lived in the US for many years, China for many years, and then back to India. The reason I actually got into the startup ecosystem actually was nothing about being planned. Serendipity plays a big role in most things in life. I happened to meet Sachin Bansal, who's the founder of Flipkart. They had just bought Myntra. And we actually, in this award on the 40 under 40 award is where I met him. And we just got along. And he said, why don't you come run the business? We're looking for somebody who can actually scale this because we believe we can build a large fashion business out of India. E-commerce as an industry was there to stay. Interestingly, there are very few categories in e-commerce where you can make money. Fashion is one of them because it has a high margin structure. So they said, why don't you actually run and scale the business? And I had just made senior partner at McKinsey, and it was probably, at least the McKinsey guys thought it was quite a dumb thing to do, but it turned out to be great. Loved the journey. I did it primarily because of the people. I'm a big believer that there are only two things that matter. One is if it's a very large market, you can figure out all the rest. And the second is you work with people that you like and enjoy. I think if you get those two right, life is good. And so in the last 4 years, Myntra, when I took over as the CEO, was about a $250 million business. This year, we'll be about $1.5 billion. We also, which is rare in the e-commerce space, got to almost profitability. We used to be very deeply negative EBITDA. We're almost break even this year, right? So in addition to scaling 200 to or 250 to $1.5 billion, we also got to profitability. And a lot of that was because we actually combined what I call left brain and right brain. So we are very much of a fashion business in one hand and a tech business on the other hand. I think bringing those two together with a bit of logistics thrown in because we do 250,000 packages a day is really sort of the magic, right? And the underlying part of all of that is building an interesting culture around bringing various different groups of people together. And so that's a lot of it. And then through that, I had lots of exposure to the Indian sort of tech ecosystem. I think we've been funded through this process by almost everybody. So I went through Naspers, then SoftBank, and then, of course, the strategic Walmart acquisition, right? So that's a bit of my journey, and very excited to be here.
Yeah, okay, that's very good. Can you just talk a bit more about, the transition from McKinsey to essentially sort of running an outfit very far from where sort of your professional roots were?
Came naturally to me. No, this is just kidding. No, it was actually a tough transition, and I think I learned more in the last 4 years than I have in the last 15 at McKinsey, right? It's obviously everything builds on one another. I think what McKinsey helped was actually getting up to speed on an industry quickly, right? Because you keep doing that again and again and again. So I think it's an important skill. I define it as sort of learnability. And actually in Myntra, even today, we look for that skill when we hire people because industries that are so fast changing, actually having lots of experience doesn't necessarily help. Being able to quickly come up to speed helps. I think that's the part that you carried across. Obviously, I think the big difference is when you run something, you realize that there's huge amounts of uncertainty and lots of curveballs that come at you, none of which are planned. You have to learn to be able to make decisions without all the facts all the time, and you hope that 7 out of 10 times you're right. And if you're right 7 out of 10 times, then life is good. If you're not, it's not. So it's very different. And then the last, of course, is when you run a business, you have lots more accountability. I mean, there's no getting away from the quarter-on-quarter numbers, especially when you have investors and funding rounds. And I'm sure you have seen this, Swati, right? So I think, being accountable and delivering on the numbers is very different from the consulting to actually getting into this. So I think those were some of the transitions.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. And so Swati, I mean, you've had a pretty sort of diverse background, India and in Singapore and LSE, and then you were a bit of a sort of Goldman Sachs kind of person, and then you made another transition. Can you take us through that journey?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be back at LSE. I think I was sitting exactly where some of you who are students here are about 14 years ago. And I never felt that one day I will come back and feel so happy about coming back because you kind of just think that, you were, when you're here, you're just focused on that journey here. And the day I got an email from Soumya inviting me back, I just felt a very, a nice kind of thing to go back to my alma mater and share my experiences since then. So I grew up in a small town called Ambala, which is in the north near Chandigarh. And my wildest aspiration was to go to St. Stephen's because I didn't even know about LSE or Oxford as much. But as I was growing up, after my 10th, one day I saw this advertisement in the paper for scholarship to Singapore, which was by the government of Singapore. And my dad said, why don't you apply for it? I said, but there are only 25 spots for students from all over India. And what is the chance that a girl from Ambala is going to qualify for that? Because I didn't participate in any national Olympiads or, the kind of exams, like people do so much now. Like they have done everything possible. But I just thought, well, you never know, so let's apply. So I applied, I got through it, went to Marriott for the first time in Delhi for my interview for the Singapore Airlines scholarship, got selected, did my 11th and 12th there. And then I started thinking big, right? Because I thought it was possible. And that's when I applied for admission to the LSE, to Oxford. I got into all of them, but LSE gave me an 80% scholarship for my tuition fee. So that kind of, was a game changer for me, that, okay, suddenly you could afford the UK education, because the pound has never been easy for the rupee. It's always 75 above, right? So I came to LSE, and when I came from India, I was thinking, I'm going to work my way through it, and I'm going to earn extra money, and I'm not going to ask my parents for anything. None of that happened, because when I came to LSE, I realized that there's so much to do on campus. So I joined the Business Society. I was president of the Business Society. I don't know if you guys are part of it. I'm sure it's still there. It was the largest society then, and in doing that, I started interacting with investment banks, because we were asking them for sponsorship. So with Deutsche, with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all these places. And that's when I learned that, investment banking, that's where you make the money. So, and I think when you come to LSE, investment banking hits you from all sides. Because I remember walking on that street outside, which is still under construction 14 years later. And even then I was like, what are you building? And even today I'm like, what are you building? It's still construction is happening. And the 3 tons was there. And everywhere there'll be a poster about Goldman and Deutsche and so I went for that, did my Easter internship, which I would highly recommend. I did that at Goldman Sachs. So got fast-tracked for the summer, did the summer internship, got an offer to join right after college. And for me, that was it, right? Because I came from a small town, somehow managed to get my education done, and then I made it to Goldman, because then that's what you think, okay, now I'm good, right? So I did that for 4 years. I did structured credit, investment banking, worked from 8 a.m. till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. every single day for those 4 years. And I was like, what did I sign up for? Although it was a great experience. And then I wanted to leave Goldman after those 4 years, because my body also just couldn't take that 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. So they said, don't quit Goldman, let's move you to a different team. So I moved to the executive office. I got an opportunity to work with the 2 CEOs of Goldman Europe, Richard Nora, Michael Sherwood, and that gave me so much exposure, because suddenly I was interacting only with partner level people, and I was the junior most person, getting that kind of responsibility. So that was good. But after doing it for a year, I realized that actually what I've started doing is management as opposed to business, and it's too early for that in my career. So that's when I got married, and my husband Rohan, he is totally passionate about doing a business, and he totally rubbed all of that on me, the whole entrepreneurship thing, doing your own. Then we were like, we're working so hard, we may as well think about doing it for ourselves. And that's when we started using this cashback site in the UK called Quidco, and I fell in love with that concept, that you could actually get money back just for shopping online. And I thought, if somebody knew it, why wouldn't they do it? And that was a problem. People didn't know about cashback sites, because they weren't as big and not as much marketing money had been spent on it. So we decided to launch our business about 6 years ago. So we started pouring pounds in the UK. And so coming from Goldman, I had no contacts whatsoever in the UK outside of that finance field. So I took to LinkedIn and I wrote to the Metro newspaper, the Daily Mail, and you'll be surprised, the Daily Mail group, they actually responded. And we went and we set up their cashback site. And that was the start, right? Because you get a break somewhere, and I think that break is important. And when you find somebody who's willing to pay for your service, you feel like, okay, maybe I have something valuable to offer. Now I just need to find more of these. So we started that, and then within a year or so, we realized that actually this model we have to take to India, because Indian e-commerce was growing, Jabong was there, all the other sites were coming up, and it'll be nice to do something where we can participate in that growth of Indian e-commerce. And with that in mind, we launched Cashkaro.com, and in 2013, so it's going to be 6 years in April now. And within 3-4 months, we were getting good traction. So I spoke with some angel investors here in the UK, including some of my Goldman seniors. And I said, do you guys want to put in money? Because that's the first time I realized that, okay, you can actually raise money. There's something called funding. There's something called equity. You don't need to do it all on your own. And so I went from one investor meeting to another, and then one angel is like, okay, let me call this person, go meet them. And just doing like that, within 48 hours, we were done. So we wanted to raise $500,000. We have 750K, and we were like, okay, what am I doing? We're giving out more and more equity the more I go for these meetings, so stop. So we stopped at that $750,000 and took that money, started growing Cashkaro. Then we did a Series A round with Kalari Capital, which was 3.8 million. And then we met Mr. Ratan Tata. He came on board as an investor. And then it's been growing, so we'll come into that. But I'll just quickly tell you what we do, because that will just set the context for the other questions as well. So now Cashkaro.com, that's the business that me and my husband run in India. In UK, we have Pouring Pounds. In Singapore, we have Zobucks. The model on all the businesses is the same. So we work with all the large e-commerce sites in India, like Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, Jabong, Make My Trip, Pepperfry, all the different categories. And we are a performance marketing channel for them. So we drive sales to them, for which they pay us commission. And from that commission, we actually pass cash back to our customers. So next time, if you're booking on Expedia or buying something on Amazon, rather than going directly, if you come to Cashkaro and then you click out from here and you go to these portals, whatever you buy, you get 5-10% extra cash back from us, which comes in your Cashkaro account, and you can transfer it to your bank account as real cash. So it's a way to save money on online shopping. So that's what we do. And that's why we felt that India is a very price-sensitive market. People love saving money. While there are already a lot of deals out there, cashback is an extra cherry on top. And if people know about it, why won't they take it? And I remember when I met Mr. Tata, after I spoke about the business for 10-15 minutes, I asked him, so, sir, what do you think? And he said, you're telling me that in a country like India, you're giving people free money. What's there not to love? That's exactly my point. So that's what we do.
Okay, all right, that's very interesting. I hope you make lots of money, and then
we make lesser than what our customers make, but if they earn, then we also earn.
Good. But post-Brexit, I think you want to be pouring pounds in the UK. But what I wanted to ask you specifically is, I think it's a great business model. You're obviously exposed to surface shopping habits. And is that sort of part of the value creation there? Basically building a database on what actually happens online and then repackaging it and selling it. Is that part of the business model, or is it purely sort of, returns from sort of the sites that you send people to?
Well, the main business model is the returns from the sites. These are additional ways to make money. So if we have a new fashion site that comes up, for example, in India, and they want to do specific marketing, we have all the data of people who actually go to Myntra from Cashkaro, or they go to Jabong, or they go to other sites. So we can do targeted campaigns for them. And also, if, let's say this Diwali, so Amazon spent almost 50 lakhs on our site just buying media, because they want that kind of visibility amongst a deal-saving audience and a high-converting audience. So we can use that database in different ways.
Sure. That's very interesting. Now, you talked about, you made it sound very easy. Raising money was not an issue. But how much of that comes out of, your kind of professional background, your experience, your networks, and then maybe the fact that you've got a bright idea, although I know there's quite a lot of competition in that space. But what is it that sort of made it, in a sense, fairly easy, as you sort of suggested?
Well, I think, so there are two questions. What made it easy for us? And I'm not saying it was easy, but what it made it possible. And the other question is, what is the funding environment like right now?
Yeah.
And maybe on the second one, you can also come in. For us, I think what I felt in the first round, and I think it varies from round to round also. In the first round, when we did our angel funding in the UK, people were excited about an opportunity which could give them a way to participate in Indian e-commerce. Because I think especially people who are in the West, they see the opportunity that India has. It is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Even the GDP rate of growth in India has been higher even than China. Apart from 2017, for the last 5 years, it's been higher. We're getting into that $2,000 per capita income inflection point. So there is a lot coming out in India which is going to change for the better. And I think it's the right time to get into that market. So if you find investors who want exposure to that market, I think that's the first thing. And then I think after that, it comes down to 2, 3 things that people look for in every business. Is this a business model which can scale? Is the market big enough for it? What are the unit metrics? Will it work down such that you are able to scale it profitably? What is the traction? I think right now I find that in India, a lot of businesses that are getting funded are businesses that are growing just very fast. And there's always a debate there that are they growing at what cost? Are they looking at the bottom line or not? So, I mean, that debate aside, I think that traction itself is an attraction for investment.
Sure, that's very, very useful. Do you want
Maybe
to
just to add on to that, I've sort of seen the large funding rounds, and then
Yeah.
I also do a bunch of angel investing, and now I'm trying to think through starting something. But Flipkart, the parent company, I think has raised, upwards of 8 or 9 billion. I think in total, in terms of the raise, in terms of actually money coming into the company. And if you think about actually probably a little bit more, north of 10. But if you think about capital in general, I think today there is more capital than opportunity. So I don't think raising money is a problem. I think the idea and the talent are the two things that actually matter.
Agreed, yeah.
Right? I think everything else, I think there's enough and more capital, and it's a dearth of opportunity. Right? So I think that's one. I think the second is maybe just a slight orthogonal point to what you were saying. I think in certain businesses, there is an interesting land grab happening, right? Because in consumer internet businesses of a certain kind, there is the first player that then gets a lot of the value, right? Uber, Lyft, right? Amazon in the US. So I think it's not that there are multiple players that can't exist, but it means that the first player gets a lot of the value creation, right? And the value creation comes because of capital and talent. Therefore, there's a lot more capital getting raised in order to accelerate, I think, the initial journey.
Oh, that's very, very interesting.
Yep.
Now, at Myntra, I think you've had a number of firsts in terms of bringing technology to
Yep.
bear on the customer experience. Can you talk us through that? And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
some of the things I've read, far exceed what I've seen in this country,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah.
And it's fascinating.
So, I think firstly, it's a very cool business, right? I mean, you're combining left brain and right brain, so it's sort of fashion and tech coming together. I think a couple of examples that I am quite excited by, and I think they have long-term potential. One is we developed the world's first AI-based brand. So there are no designers. There are 4 product managers and about 8 to 10 engineers. There are 2 brands in Myntra today. One is called Here and Now, and the other is called Moda Rapido. And both these are actually designed completely by machines, and they do incredibly well. And it's very simple. What happens today, if for most of us, and if you remember backgrounds, right, most of us who joined Myntra are not from the fashion industry. So we always were quite puzzled why you actually have spring, summer, and autumn, winter in a country which is mostly hot most of the year, right? And then you order like 12 months in advance, and you never are able to figure out what the trend is. If you add to the fact that India is actually a huge manufacturing hub where you can actually have very short lead times, we said, could you try something different? So Myntra has about 30 million monthly active users that come, right? So every month we have 30 million unique visits. And they all come and spend a lot of time on the app because they do window shopping. It's the same as when you go to a mall. They actually go and look at what all is there. So because we have so much data, you can actually figure out for every article type, what are the attributes that matter? You can say, this month, black T-shirts with round collars are the ones that are going to sell. Or, A-line dresses will sell more than the others because we have lots of data. So we basically say, here is the best-selling attribute recipe. Then actually, University of Montreal, I think, was the one that first did it. There's now neural network programs that can take these attribute recipes and create brand new designs, right? We use one called the General Adversarial Network, but there are many, many different things that you can do. So we feed it in, and it actually generates 100 different T-shirt designs. Right? Then because we have so much data, you can feed those T-shirt designs into the data and ask the machine, what is the probability that these 10 will be bestsellers? And the machine says, these are the 10 bestsellers. Then we actually get that made and sold. It's every 4 weeks, we have a drop, right? So it's no longer a 6-month cycle, no longer a 2-year cycle. Every 4 weeks, we actually generate new things. This brand is doing incredibly well. Today it's $50-60 million brand, so it's not large in the Myntra scheme of things, but it's growing at 200%. It's actually profitable. There's no waste in the system. So that's one example. Just on another example would be how we actually think about our supply chains, right? So India is very complicated supply chain market, right? So India has 26,000 pin codes. We serve about 19,000 of them, roughly, right? If you go through all, there are some parts in Jammu and Kashmir that you don't go to, some parts. Incidentally, the Northeast is a very large market, very inaccessible, but very large market, very fashion-forward market. So what we said is, and it's very hard to ship clothes. So because of what you guys do and what we do, we give lots of discounts, and then Cashkaro comes on top and then gives more discounts. So if you actually want to make money in this, you actually can't airship a product, right? If you airship a product, you lose all the money. So what we do is, and you have 200,000, 300,000 styles every season that sell across 19,000 pin codes, right? And we don't want to airship it. It's a very complicated operations research problem. So what we do is we actually get data science and machine learning to tell us, where do you forward deploy inventory, right? So before a customer buys something, you actually ship the product. So just think about that. The cost of shipping it wrong is very high. So what we do is we have 4 big forward deployment centers. And we actually, as long as we get it right, 95, 97% of the time for that particular region, we use machine learning to say, how do you actually, and the same styles don't repeat season on season, right? So you have to actually say, what is a similar style from the last season so you can actually look at the past data. So we use a lot of analytics and data science to say, how do I actually place the inventory before it's sold, right? And that actually then prevents, supply chain costs come down dramatically. So I think there's lots of applications, but I think machine learning, lots of data available, and lots of interesting algorithms available now means that almost every industry, you can take a traditional process,
Right.
apply tech to it, and everything, from something as inane as or something that you don't think about, which is product design and creativity, all the way to supply chain can be transformed.
Sure. Fascinating. Very, very interesting. People used to talk about just-in-time system, but you're talking about just-before-time system. Just before we order things, it's kind of there. So you're almost predicting what it is that we're about to do before we've decided we want to actually do it.
We
which
often
is
know
very
better.
interesting. Yeah, fantastic. Very interesting. So Swati, you've got a huge record also of reaching out, I think, to young people, especially women, and being a woman entrepreneur, I think, you're a role model. Can you say a little bit about some of the challenges that women face, specifically maybe networking, raising capital, coming up with an idea, being taken seriously even? In India, I think it's about, out of entrepreneurs, about 13-14% tend to be women. And there seems to be a glass ceiling even in the sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem. Can you sort of say a few things about that and some of the remedies that you think sort of could be applied?
Yeah, the stats are not good. That's no hiding from that. I think it's a variety of reasons. What I've also seen is that in India sometimes, like the first thing is the support from family. That's really important, because being an entrepreneur means that you need to do a lot of work. You need to always be available, and you make sacrifices at every step. And for me, I know it's been possible because my husband is super supportive, my mother-in-law is super supportive, and so is the rest of my family. And I think women who don't enjoy that support, it becomes a really difficult task for them. So it's really important that when we play the role of that family, we don a very supportive hat to not make women feel guilty about not being at home or not being with the kids, or even delaying having kids. Whatever it is that makes them happy. And I think that psyche of, what people are saying and you have to listen to all of that, I think that's what brings women down. It's changing though. I think there are, in my own team, we have a team of 100 people, out of which 42 are girls. And that's, while the ratio can be better, it's not bad. And I have, 42% ratio is pretty good. And I have girls who travel almost 2 hours to get to work every day. And they are doing roles like content writing, CRM. So at the start of their career itself, they are getting that support from their family to go all the way, to do that. I think what makes it a little harder for them is also that, unfortunately, the infrastructure and the safety environment in India is not great. So when these women travel, and if they have to leave work at 6:30, they won't get home before 9. And if it's raining, then they won't get home before 10 because the traffic goes berserk if it rains. No, so these are some of the small things that become that become hurdles to growth. And it's a shame that these are things that kill our productivity, but it's true. It does. So that's one. I think, and the other thing to just say is that I think women also need to want it more. Not everybody wants it. Like sometimes women are also very, they kind of think that, okay, it's okay to not have a career, or, it's okay now, I'm going to be home only. If that makes you happy, it's fine. But then, you have to remember that it's a choice that you're making. And if you make a choice to have a career, discuss that with your to-be husband before you get married. Discuss it with your family before you get into that situation. I think then just having that communication channel open can sometimes give opportunities that women don't put themselves out for. So sometimes I find women who say that, oh no, I haven't even discussed it yet because how to do it? I can't do it. How to do it? But if they have to get over that. So I think that desire also has to come.
Sure, very interesting. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So in a sense, having a discussion with your partner before you sign anything is a good idea.
I think that's okay, and I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
So there are a lot of movies coming out about this now in India also, because there is a lot of awareness. Absolutely. In fact, I remember that my mother-in-law told me that I will never ask you to not work because I have done that and I regret it. Because I've spent my life raising kids, and today look at my kids, they're so busy because they're doing startups. They have no time, right? So what am I supposed to do? But that's fair. But then it's great that, she's allowing me to do that.
Sure.
But that's the thing. Look at me. I'm using the word allow because I'm still looking for that permission, and that's kind of very steep in our society.
Okay, that's very good. Now, you've transitioned from sort of Goldman Sachs to being a co-founder, and you're in a state of transition to a degree. So you've stepped down from being CEO.
Yep.
Are you okay to comment on what's next?
I think I don't yet, not yet, but I'll tell you what I have been doing, which I think is Jan 31st was my last day at Myntra. And I'm on gardening leave, which is a term that I'd never sort of heard before.
It's a banking term.
It's an outstanding term. You get paid to do nothing. But what I am doing now is actually meeting interesting people. So, I've now, over the last month and a half, met about 100 plus sort of interesting people across the US, lots in India, right? Both coasts of the US and so on. And I'm going to go spend 10 days in China. But what I'm using this time for is actually to learn, right? I mean, you actually seldom get opportunities, especially later, to take a step back, to take 2-3 months off and be able to learn something new, right? And I feel like now that I'm doing it, I should do it every 10 years, right? I've sort of worked for 20 plus years and I've never sort of taken this step back, reflection time, because I also believe that your best ideas come when you're relaxed and when you're not looking. Right, so I think that's a bit of what I'm trying to do. I would like to do something entrepreneurial. I'm trying to sort of figure out the areas and places on what.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah. I must check and see if LSE has a gardening leave policy as well.
Yeah.
So I think what we might do now is perhaps open up for questions from the audience. I know some of you have questions. Some of you are students here. Some of you have actually traveled a long way to be here today. So if there are questions, okay. I think we have a roving mic, so perhaps the lady there in the middle.
Thank you so much for the discussion today. My question is actually related to something that you both have briefly touched upon. But what if some of the tangible policy changes that you think should be implemented, because you had this whole hula around Make in India, but nothing really tangible came out of it.
Yeah.
So what are some of the policy changes that you would perhaps recommend that can propel like the India startup story?
Yeah.
And also you talked about acquisitions and funding, and the trend that we see is that while obviously the bigger fish swallows the smaller fish, the bigger fish usually comes from overseas. Except for the token Indian companies, you don't really have Indian companies venturing out from the Indian market and swallowing the other fish in the other ponds.
Sure.
So how can that happen as well?
I'm happy to start. And
Yeah,
maybe you
yeah.
can
Because
build on it.
policy, if you
Yeah.
guys sort your policy, we are sorted anyway.
Yeah. So I think I'll answer it more broadly in terms of the tech ecosystem and the digital ecosystem in India and what will it take to unlock it. I think you hit on 2 points which are interesting. One is availability of capital, which and Indian capital at some level, right? And whether you should think about that differently. So firstly, just as an entrepreneur and a CEO, I think having consistency of policy makes a huge difference, right? It doesn't matter what the policy is, but being consistent about it over long periods of time is really, really helpful. And I think the government does some of it, but I think if you think about the new e-com policy that's come out and so on, I feel like, not really enough consultation with the industry to figure out what's right. Because I think the role of policy, in my mind, should be to enable businesses. And it should be nothing more than that. I think that's one. Second is, if you think about exits, one of the big problems in India today is you can't list a company that's not profitable, right? So what happens today? The reason there's no Indian capital is there's no Indian return. So if there are large Indian capital houses that put in the money, if you are not able to IPO in India, you're not able to get an exit. So all the exits have happened outside, right? If you look at Make My Trip, if you look at every one of them, is all listed either in the NASDAQ or Singapore or whatever else, right? So if you actually enabled a real marketplace for you to discover price and be able to list, obviously with all the right guardrails, I think that could open up the ecosystem in a very, very different way, right? So if you allow that, so I was part of our prime minister actually had a group of people come and talk to him about what will it take. And this was one of the big things that that group actually came up with, right? Now it's not been implemented. I think we're getting into an election year and so on. But I think that's one big unlock that I think will allow this to happen. I think your second question is a bit more philosophical of, why is it that there are not Indian companies that have actually become global, right? I mean, the largest story was Flipkart, which is now obviously part of Walmart. There I think, I have a philosophical view and a practical view. The philosophical view is, I think in the end, capital markets and talent will go wherever it is. I think whether it's global capital, Indian capital, doesn't really matter, right? And I think it's okay to actually be bought if it's a better business, right? If it's the right business decision. Now, the China model has been very different. The reason why Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, etc. have all come up is they had enough of a closed ecosystem for these companies to gain scale before they opened it out. And now these guys have all gone global, right? Tencent is an investor in us, in Flipkart, right? Unfortunately, in India, that ship has left the bus. I mean, that bus is left, right? Whatever, that ship is gone. Because in reality, what's happened actually is that before any companies could get to relative scale, you've opened the market out completely. Now that, by the way, has resulted in some fast scale-ups. It has resulted in some good investments, but it's also, in my mind, resulted such that Indian companies haven't really gone global. Now, I actually think, by the way, we are at the very beginning of a very large industry. So what you've seen the last 5, 7, 10 years is nothing. I think there will be multiple $10 billion businesses that come out of India. So the real question is, over the next 10 years, could you create enough of an ecosystem? And I think that's happening. Because I think now, you take Sachin, for example, who's the Flipkart founder. Sort of, he's putting all of his money back into the tech ecosystem. And he's now, by the way, a fairly large VC, right? Which is Indian capital. So I think the next 10 years, by the way, that'll change dramatically. And I think there will be multiple companies that actually come out of India. And I think they'll be more competitive because they'll, from the very beginning, compete with the global guys. It's a long-winded answer, sorry.
Fascinating. Very good. Do you want to add to that, or?
No, I think I agree with what you said, and I think things are changing in India. It's a very exciting time. Like, when I think about, was it a good decision to move back, for example, because I lived in London for 11 years, and then we moved back, right? And I think that it couldn't have been a better decision because it's so much fun, because there's so much hustle in India right now, and there's so much growth opportunity that you feel like if you want to make it, this is a good time.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling you get when you go back. Yes, there's pollution. Yes, it's chaotic. There's like lots of stuff that can still, it has to get sorted as well. But it's exciting and it's fun.
590 million Gen Zs and 600 million phones. It's very hard. And then your $2,000, which is usually the inflection point, is 3,000, but we're getting there, right?
Yeah.
Those three trends you can't beat. So next 20 years, this will happen. So who takes advantage of it is not clear, but I think there is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree. And I think with like Oyo Rooms, Zomato, like there are a lot of
Ola.
companies, Ola, they're starting to think global as well now. So as they think global and they're equipped with all this cash, yeah, they'll also go out and acquire if it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we had a question.
Thank you. My name is Tapan. It's great hearing about your experiences. I had a question because both of you mentioned that it's a very tech-driven business, these days that are flourishing, basically. I had a question about how easy it is to access all these new technologies in terms of intellectual property. Like, most of it is developed outside, I'm guessing. How much of it is in-house developed? And for a new startup, how easy it is to access these things? I know a lot of things are open source,
Yeah.
but still, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
So, I think firstly, by the way, as I think about technology, why is technology important? Because I think you can do exponential things that you can't do before. So the problem that I told you about supply chain, you can't solve unless you have deep data science, right? Because it's too complex of a problem that you can't solve. That's why I think it's needed, and that's why it's core to many of the businesses. Because otherwise you scale linearly, right? If you want to get 20% month-on-month growth, you need some core technology that's unlocking something. I think so. That's one point. I think the second point is a lot of it is actually open source. I think people are building IP, of course. Actually, I believe that in India at least, we're not building enough IP. I think we're using too much of basically open source tech, and we're building interesting. See, I think there are three moats that you can have. One is IP, which is based on algorithms. The other is data and large sources of data. And third is you control the distribution channel, right? Today in India, I think it's the data and the distribution channel and not enough on IP. I think we can do more.
I also think that the talent is not being nurtured and it's not developing as fast as it should for an economy like India to grow at the rate that we want it to. Because while we have great institutions and overall, there are a few really good institutions, a lot of them are okay. And that's, I think, what happens in our talent pool as well. We get a few people who are exceptional and a lot of people are okay. So while that's an opportunity for people also, and I think if in any country, it has to be in India where people have that kind of hunger and drive to quickly move to the other level because they are willing to work hard, they don't care about work-life balance, they don't care about weekends or a pub drink or, most of those things. And they want to go to that next level. So India is giving that opportunity, but I think it's, it needs to be better. Because in e-commerce as well, there are a lot of new ways to grow that people are exploring. But many of these strategies themselves are like 2-3 years old.
Right.
So there's not like a lot of good experience which is out there. And people who are the companies that are raising money faster, they are the unicorns, they also lap up this talent really fast. So for other companies who are in that Series B-ish level, are like, okay, I can't get that one, but let me take this one. And, so I think generally there is dearth of talent, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some of you should come back.
Questions from the upper floor? No? Okay. How about the gentleman over there?
Hi, my name is Jean. Thank you for your talk. Now, since both of your businesses revolve more or less around data and connectivity, I saw a recent stat which said that India now averages the highest data consumption per capita.
Yep.
So do you think that digital revolution has led to a big boost recently, or do you think the impact is still in process?
I think it's still very much in process. I think, my sense is the next 10 years, this will become dramatically bigger. I mean, just think about it. For all the news that e-commerce makes, what do you think is, we have $1 trillion retail market, roughly, right? More or less. Do you know what the entire e-commerce market is? Any idea? Across Amazon, Flipkart, everybody put together. Any ideas? Less. It's 4%, right? It's nothing, right? And if you take any of the economies, so the China, which I think is where we will model more closely than the US, is in the mid-20s. The US is at 17%. So all of the growth is ahead of us. I think what Jio has done now for data, in terms of unlocking both phone usage as well as data usage, will be the basic building block. That is one building block. UPI, Aadhaar-based payments is another building block. I think having some of these big building blocks now in place, I think all of the growth and acceleration is ahead of us. What you've seen is nothing so far.
And I think what's also happening is that currently there is awareness, but there's a gap between awareness and adoption. Because those are two different things, and we try to actually capitalize on that. So we have people on Cashkaro who actually, like, there are guys who run cyber cafes in smaller towns, people who have mobile recharge shops. They are actually placing orders via Cashkaro on other sites because people come to them and say, oh, I want to buy a mobile phone, but I don't know how to order. Can you order for me? So they've got that awareness from somewhere that online is something, there's e-commerce is something, but they don't know how to use it. So that's why we also have concepts like assisted e-commerce. So in tier 2, tier 5 cities, there are, you know how you have Collect Plus stores here. It's those kind of stores where you can go in and they'll receive your order, they'll place the order for you. And at Cashkaro, this month, we're also launching a new product called Earn Karo, which is in the social deal commerce space. And what happens there is that you can share deals which exist on the internet and you earn money when somebody shops via them. So for people who may not be as savvy to use cashbacks and all, they're sharing deals and earning as well. So there is that gap where, you know, people know that online is something, but they're not doing it themselves yet.
Okay, very good question.
Thank you for that. Can I just follow up a bit?
Well, there's a few other hands up. So, yeah, how about this? Yeah. All right, we'll do the back first, and then we'll come back to you.
I was wondering whether you could hit on any problems or industries in India where you think there's a lot of opportunity and where people like us who are smart and we're ready to go back and who have, you know, learnability, you know, we could possibly exploit.
Yeah.
And more specifically, I'm more interested in, I think something you hit on before as well, you know, starting the big fishes.
Yeah.
Okay, like why doesn't India have, for example, like a Tesla,
Yeah.
like a SpaceX,
Yeah.
in industries that are not just tech and internet based,
Yeah.
but have a bit of physical aspect to
Sure. So I'll start with first the spaces, and then I'll tell you, maybe I'll start with the reverse, which is, look, I mean, the entire startup ecosystem in entrepreneurship is 15 years, right? If you take the Valley, it's 50 years. So I also think, you know, you have to give it some time to evolve. And I do think over a period of time, physical products will start to actually become bigger and bigger, not just consumer internet. So Aether Energy, it's a new startup that actually has a very cool bike. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an interesting concept, right? And I actually think it'll do well. It has a global brand. It could become a global brand. There are many such that are starting up, but I think it's early days. The reason for that is it's just more complicated to do because then you face the realities of India, which is you have to actually set up manufacturing. Then, you know, there'll be an inspector of factories that'll show up. You have to figure out how to actually set a real plant up. You know, all of the consumer internet businesses and before that IT services, which is Wipro, Infosys, etc. of the world, basically avoided almost all government and regulatory interaction, and therefore the businesses scaled. I think for the next wave of growth, that can't be the case. So you have to sort of, that goes back to the earlier point of can you ease how do you make it India, as well as digital India, and if both those come together, that'll be interesting. In terms of spaces, I think there are 4 spaces that I believe will become very large. I think e-com, by the way, will continue to be there, but leaving that aside, I think education will be very large. I think video is now almost free. Just to give you a fact, you know, video catalog usage in Myntra used to be less than 2%. It's now 20%, right? So I think people will learn very differently if you can create a killer product. I think except for Byju's, there's very little at scale. So could you actually create something in education that I think will be very interesting? The second space actually is healthcare, where again, I think, you know, all the macro trends are there, right? You have all sorts of, both in terms of wellness and in terms of disease, there's lots of opportunity and there are very few doctors. So could you again use technology to actually create an at-scale business that I think will be very, very different? The third space I believe is brands. India today for the retail market, 85% is unbranded. In almost every economy, when you go from $2,000 to $3,000, people want brands. I think the millennials and Gen X will want their brands done very differently. They'll connect with it very differently. So could you create the next Zara, the next Nike, the next whatever else from India that actually then goes global, right? So I think that's another space which I'm very, very excited about and I think will do well. And then I think the last space actually is around I guess it's also healthcare, but it's primarily around wellness. And I think there's a very large wellness opportunity. You know, you take sleep, you take any of these. I think we have a very large population which is going through stressful times. So could you create interesting businesses out of it? So, I mean, it's not the most systematic view to life, but I'm just saying there are 3-4 big opportunities, and every one of these will be multi-billion-dollar opportunities. So I think all of you should go back and start. There's no question.
I think India has a lot of real problems to solve. So if you want to be one of those real entrepreneurs that want to see all the journeys, there's a lot of opportunity. Health tech is one of my favorite sectors right now to look at, because I think, unfortunately, we have so many patients to treat in all categories. Like my brothers just started a startup where they've made these wearable devices for people who, have paralysis and they walk with a gait like this. So you just put their brace on and you start walking straight. And you're impacting lives, right? These people are getting their lives back. There are so many opportunities like that. Also in agri-tech as well, it's coming up a lot, because we produce so much crop in India and so much of it goes waste because of bad storage, because of weather problems, so there are these kind of very real on-the-ground problems to solve as well.
Okay, thank you. I think we had
Mind
one
if I
at the
ask?
back there.
Yeah. Thanks, Ananth and Swati, for the great talk. I wanted to say that, India today it's a nation of shopkeepers. I read somewhere that we have a shop density of 1 shop for every 21 people. And like that was Britain's strength in the 18th and 19th century, being a nation of shopkeepers. How do you think India can leverage that? How do you think we can make our shopkeepers and farmers to be more entrepreneurial?
So the shopkeepers one, I have a very strong point of view, because we're already doing a lot of it at Myntra and Flipkart and now Walmart. There are, I think, 7-8 million Kirana stores, roughly, which are the last mile. Now, these are the last mile, literally the last mile Kirana stores. So India, by the way, has a very complicated distribution model, right? You have multiple layers of distribution, primarily, by the way, driven by credit and lack of transparency. So nobody wants to take working capital risk. That's why you have all these layers. Now, I think what can be done very easily with UPI and payment technology is, could you actually cut out a lot of the distribution and actually enable the Kirana stores to do a lot more? So at Myntra today, by the way, we have about 15,000 odd Kirana stores that do the last mile delivery for us, that also in some cases do assisted shopping that you were talking about earlier. Now you can do multiple things with these guys, right? They can do assisted shopping, they can do deliveries. They can actually, by the way, also at some level act as lending hubs, right? I mean, there are many different things once you have data around each of these to build products around. People are doing interesting things around point of sale devices that they're actually embedding into these and then using that data to build businesses. So I actually think what matters is the entrepreneurship of these guys. They know the customer. They know the local market. And if you can combine that with a tech layer that's interesting, I think the possibilities are truly endless. ShopX is another interesting one that is rolling up and creating a tech layer for a bunch of Kirana stores, right? I think they have 35,000 Kirana stores that are under it. So I think there's lots of opportunity to change that.
We've just done a partnership with a company that's given us access to 4 lakh Kirana stores all over tier 2, tier 5 cities. And right now in these stores, you can do recharge, you can buy insurance, they can book your travel, they can do P2P lending. So there's lots of these small services which they're doing. But like he rightly said, it really all comes down to how entrepreneurial that shopkeeper is, and are they open to digitizing? Because today, Digital India is giving them an opportunity to treble their income. But if they continue to live in the, yesteryears where they can't adopt that technology or they don't want to make that effort, then they won't be able to capitalize on it.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. I think we have room for just one more question.
Have you got the red card now?
We should take one
Got
from
the
the
red
lady
card.
here.
Red card.
So, this lady here.
It's the last question, so you have to make it count. No pressure.
Hi, thank you so much for your thoughts. My name is Anjana. I wanted to talk about something in the employment perspective. So you spoke about, we should go back and start something. But there are so many people who don't want to start something, but they want to work for something else, right? And I come from Bangalore, where every second person I know is an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And the thing is, how probably in metropolitan and Tier 1 cities, people are still open to working in startups. But Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, like personal experience I've seen,
Yep.
they still have this, they have this sort of mind block. They say there's no security, there's no job security if I work for a startup. So if it's, say, an e-commerce or some some field that is established in, say, entrepreneurship, then fine. But then there are so many, like you spoke about agri-tech, it's just growing, right? So how do you think this notion can be changed? The fact that, we need a lot, and we are almost going to become the most populated country. So
Sure.
we have a lot of human capital. How can we touch up on, like, garner or harness that potential? What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. I think first is you need success stories. I think people get inspired by stories, not by facts, right? So I think if you think about, our startup ecosystem, right? I mean, the folklore around, a guy from Haridwar coming and starting this, which was Mukesh, who founded Myntra, right? Or a Sachin or a Bhavesh. I think it's incredible, right, in terms of what these guys have done. I think the more these stories actually become folklore, I think the more people will be willing to take risk. Because I think inherently, by definition, entrepreneurship is risk-taking, right? I mean, you have to be willing to fail. I think most people are not willing to fail because they don't see the upside or there's not enough conviction. So the question is, how do you give them the conviction? I think that's one. I think the less exciting, more processy answer is, I think in general, failure and bankruptcy, in particular in India, the laws need to become much, much, much better. And it's not the case now.
I think also you were talking about people working in startups as opposed to starting them. So I think that's a great option to consider because the reality is doing a startup is more glorious from the outside than it really is.
Definitely
and
more glorious,
yeah. So it is but if you work with the startup, you equally get a lot of good experience. So I think one should really consider that, and once you've done that, you will actually be very employable. I think that a Microsoft or any big company that you may want to look at later on post a startup stint will value that person who's worked in a startup. And if you can say that, look, I joined Myntra, for example, and I launched the entire accessories category and I took it from X to X, you can take that accountability and show your performance, and that is of value to a future potentially big company as well. And I also think that while the Modi government's whole agenda around Startup India, while the laws may not have really helped us, but the conversation around startup, it has actually made it cool. Because now, I mean, I was speaking at IIT Delhi 2 weeks back, and it was a lecture theater maybe double this size. And when we did a poll on how many people here want to do a startup, more than half the hands went up. So many people from different towns of India are saying, I want to do a startup and this is my career choice. Because they have also seen stories, like he said, there's also folklore around, the experience that you get from doing those startups, even working with them. We get so many applications now at Cashkaro. Every time I put a video out on LinkedIn about which openings we have, it gets like 60,000, 70,000 views in 4 days. Because people are looking for those opportunities, right? And they want to work with a startup more than ever. I've had people who've dropped Deloitte jobs, other ID company jobs, because they want to work in a startup and get that experience. So I think gradually, even the parents and society is kind of beginning to think that startup is cool.
There are 20 people from McKinsey to come to Myntra, so not to...
Yeah.
McKinsey may not like it so much, but it's very cool to come.
Yeah, but you shouldn't take it up just because startup is cool. Because cool, again, is a very outside word. Startup means you will have to take more accountability. You can't hide. But this message is not right for a room of LSE people because you guys are the ones who will do well in it also. So it's a place for you to shine. You see it that way.
Okay, well, that's very kind. I'm wondering whether you can both just give us a minute or so on, words of wisdom for the audience, what they might do next, where they might go next, what the future might hold for them.
Start.
You have many more years of experience, so I'll let you go first.
It's all the gray. I just want to think so that I can actually make it count. I think 3 things. The first is, I think all of you are incredibly lucky already in terms of where you are, right? So I would say take advantage of the luck that you already have. I think there's almost zero cost to failure. So if you don't take risk now, you will never take risk. So take inordinate amounts of risk because as long as you can get some learning out of it, you're always ahead. It doesn't matter whether the startup is successful, perceived as successful, what your valuation is all immaterial. If you're learning, right, and you're enjoying it, I think you should take risk because I think with risk comes disproportionate both learning and reward. So I would say that's one thing that I would say. I think the second is, I think just be lifelong learners. My own sense, and I know it's probably bad to say this in LSE, but I think the concept of a 4-year, 2-year degree of learning and then doing 30 years of career is gone, right? I mean, it's just dead. You have to keep constantly learning. So the question is, how do you keep learning? It can be through osmosis, it can be through experiences, it can be through continuous education. So I think about how you will personally continue to learn over the next 20, 30 years, because the pace of change is really good. And the last thing is, while there's a lot of this tech, everything else that's happening, I think the one constant that doesn't change is around apprenticeship and people that you like. So figure out this ecosystem of a group of people that will support you over a period of time. They can be your peers, they can be your mentors, but think about people that you can learn from and you enjoy being with, and build an ecosystem of people around you like that. And I think you have 30 years to do so, right? And so that is a compounding rate of interest. So you get a lot more every 10 years as you do this more and more and more. So I would say those are the 3 things, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah, so I think going back to my LSE experience in terms of when I was here, what else could I have done? I would just say 2 things. One, that I think make sure you do a lot of internships. I think London gives you that opportunity. You know, I wish I had interned in other places also apart from Goldman, and maybe in other places apart from finance as well, so that I could see different perspectives. Because once you start your career, it's really hard to take a break. Because if you move from one opportunity to the other, they also want you to join ASAP. Like he said, there are very few opportunities in life where you get this break to do learning, you know, so make that count while you have it at LSE. I think you should travel more when you're in London, because this really is such a learning opportunity. You get to see what's happening in other countries. You get ideas out of it as well. Leverage your alumni network more. I never did that, you know, until when I was coming now to LSE and I saw the alumni list, and I was like, oh my God, all these people are LSE alumni. Why didn't I ever reach out? I think, US does a better job at this because you just feel like, oh, this is my Harvard alum and this is Stanford alum. And somehow we don't make such a bigger deal out of it in UK colleges, but I think we should. So you should see how to do that. The biggest experience or like sort of learning for me that has been through the last 14 years of working is to not assume that the answer to anything is a no, but to actually just ask that question. And I think I've done that through my entire life. Like when I got a scholarship at LSE, the first offer I got was at 50%. And my dad said, I can't afford the rest 50% because it's too much. I said, well, then what to do? I said, you know what? Maybe I'll go back and ask for more. At most, they can say no. Then people are like, oh, they'll think you are so cheap. I said, let them think. And how does it matter? LSE is so big. Like, what will they think about one student? I'm just going to ask them, right? And I did, and they gave me 80%, and then allowed me to come here. Similarly, when I got a job at Goldman, I wanted to switch my divisions, and I was scared that maybe I'll lose my job if I do that. But I asked, and I got it. Then after that, when we went and, we raised money from Kalari, I told Vani, who's the head, that, look, I really want to meet Mr. Tata. Can you make that happen? And she said, no, I can't just arrange meetings like that. I said, why don't you ask? Like, ask, And then I was after her, and she got it. And then when I met Mr. Tata, I remember sitting on that big table. He was sitting having his dessert, and they told me, you can pitch here. The screen was this side. And I was sitting there in that room thinking, if I go and pitch there, he's sitting here, I won't make any eye contact. And this is a 15-minute meeting, and I'm supposed to close him for investment. There'll be no relationship. And at that moment, I decided I'm not going to do this pitch. So I went up to him and I said, so do you mind if we have a chat? I'm just going to sit opposite you and we'll have a conversation. I'll only take 15 minutes. And he said, yeah, sure, why not? And that changed everything because we had a conversation. And 15 minutes later, he was in. But if I was standing there going through my slide after slide and going through my deck, I don't think it would have worked. So I think it's about believing in yourself and not doubting yourself when you feel like, oh, but I don't want this, I want this. Just ask that question. And this one thing, I think, has changed my life at every step. So this would be my biggest learning to share.
Okay, thank you very much, Swati and Ananth. I couldn't have asked for more. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.